Hey guys, today I have an epic video for you. For you Colt collectors out there, this is it. I'm going to show you the best and the worst. Okay guys, if you've been to our website recently, you have seen that we got two really rare guns in. They both came from the same collector. This right here is a house in some neighborhoods. We have well over $200,000 sitting here. When we talk about the best and the worst, you could argue about the fact that this is the best. I think it is. Many collectors would say the Singer was the best made 1911 ever made. And that would include the 1911 A1 as well. This is actually a 1911 A1 because it has the modification on the mainspring housing and also other modifications, including plastic grips, special Singer plastic grips. This is basically a 1911 A1. You see it was made at the Singer Sewing Machine Company. Here's a picture of the factory. And this is from 1938. They got a contract to make 1911 A1s. We'll talk about why they got a contract, but let's first look at the other side. Front strap, a little bit of wear patina there, but a beautiful Singer, and of course, a very large investment if you were thinking about buying one. Now let's take a look at the worst. This is arguably the worst. You can see the finish, and actually you'd say, wow, this thing's got a lot of wear, but it really doesn't. These grips are nice and sharp. There's not much wear on the metal itself, but the finish is poor. Now, all of these North American Arms, these were 1911s from 1918. So this is 1911, has the earlier features. Wooden grips, of course, is most noticeable. And the mainspring housing is also very noticeable. You can see that right away. This is 1911 from 1918, made for World War I, but never issued, never accepted into the military. This was for World War II, 1938, although we were not in the war yet. And this finish is what I was going to talk about. First of all, these were not made very well. You can see even here on the logo, look at the font on limited. It actually goes downhill. It's lopsided. So they were poorly made, poorly put together. And then the finish, they didn't prepare the metal properly, didn't know what they were doing. And so the finish on these are pretty much all like this. They just show a lot of wear and almost like a reddish hue. There was a lot of copper in the bluing. And here's a picture of another one I saw on Rock Island, similar wear pattern. Here's the other side of the gun. So you'd say, well, that's really worn. It really isn't. The finish didn't hold up. It just kind of flaked off. And that's why almost all of them look like this. Now, when buying high-end guns like this, make sure you talk to somebody who's an expert. There are people out there who will charge you for their opinions, and some of them are just not worth it. I hate to say this too broadly, but basically we advertise that we will give you free evaluations on your guns. Now, there's some caveats to that. First of all, we don't do free evaluations on things we don't know. So I don't know much about Winchesters, and I don't collect antiques. We do sell them from time to time, but we usually call somebody else. But for most of your standard collectible guns, we do free evaluations, free appraisals. That does not mean that you can send us a list of 10 or 20 guns that you're thinking about bidding on and saying, how much should I bid for each one of these? But if you have a high-end gun that you're purchasing or you want to sell, you want to get an appraisal, we do free appraisals. Just contact our website. We'd be happy to help you out. Certainly on things like this, we do have a database of known guns. We have a database that includes some fake guns. So again, before you make an investment like this, make sure you talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. As you probably know, these are both in .45 caliber, the best and the worst. Let's talk about why. Well, it's very similar in that the United States wanted to have, they actually were required to have more than a single source for any material that the military bought. So that means it's just like today, we don't want to get all of our computer chips from one place, because if there's a war and that place is a belligerent or taken over by a belligerent or bombed, then our ability to get chips during a war is curtailed. So obviously, the US government, World War I, they actually required that Colt find other producers of the same gun. So here's a list of the makers for the 1911 in World War I. You can see that the original contract was Colt, and you can see that they made about $500,000 for World War I. Then the Springfield Armory, that was about $25,000. Now, Springfield Armory, I have one right here. This is a beautiful gun. It's got the flaming bomb. Springfield was making rifles, of course, and other, they were an arsenal, and they were doing repairs, but also making weapons. So they were a shoe-in, did a beautiful job. 25,000 of the Springfield Armories. They also have a very distinct eagle right here. Next, we have the Remington UMC. I don't have one with me right now, but here's a picture of the Remington UMC. They made about 20,000 of those. These are also very rare and very valuable, and that takes us to Winchester. Most of you say, wait, they never made one, and you'd be right. They actually did get a contract in 1918, but the war ended before they started production of the 1911. Boy, if I had one of those, it would really be worth a lot of money. And then we see North American Arms. They made about 100. So as you can see from the logo, these came out of Canada. So again, they not only were trying to diversify so that it came from more than one source, but it also came from a separate country. Now, I think there was a little bit of quid pro quo going on here because it made no sense why they went to North American Arms. North American Arms had been making no weapons. They actually bought a bankrupt company, the Ross Rifle Company. They didn't know anything about making guns, and yet they were given a government contract for up to 500,000 guns. Bottom line is they didn't know what they were doing. They had no experience and no expertise. For some reason, they got a contract, and I'm suspicious, but I can't solve that mystery. They went ahead and made 100 of these. Every one of them was rejected. And then the war ended, and they were told to just get rid of them. So they have no military proofs, no P, no marking on the barrel. The serial number is strangely here. Also on the trigger, although it's covered up way back in here, there's a serial number. And then underneath the grip down here is a serial number. So these never were issued. Technically, we can't say that this was a military weapon because it was never accepted into the United States military. So then World War I ended, and of course, we went through some years where Americans were very pacifistic. Basically, we don't want to get involved in any more European wars, and I don't blame them a bit, because there was a lot of people got killed over keeping the powers, the royal families in place in the European countries. And the United States said, why are we getting involved in these European wars? So they were trying to stay out of the war between the wars, and rightfully so. But 1938, the United States, the people in the know, figured sooner or later we're going to get into this war. They saw Hitler growing and building his military. Tensions are rising. And so they go to Colt again and say, we need other sources. And the first place they tried, strangely enough, was a Singer sewing machine company. Doesn't make logical sense to me, but I'm sure somebody at Singer was talking to the government and say, let's see how quickly we could retool a factory and put out 1911 A1s. So at that time, Colt was the only one making them, but Singer got a contract and they said, basically, let's see how quickly you can produce 500 1911 A1s. And that's what they did. They retooled the factory and they were able to make the 500 of them, and they presented them to the government, and the government said, well done. You can see the P proof here. You can see the inspector proof here. There would also be a P proof here. And then the barrel then is also marked unique to the Singer. So everything on here is a Singer part, with the exception of this magazine. This is R marked, so this is not a Singer magazine, but everything else on this is a Singer part. So why did they stop at 500? Well, it's kind of a unique example because the reason for each one of these was we want to make sure somebody other than Colt can back them up when needed. This one was so bad they rejected it. This one was so good that they rejected it. They didn't reject it. They took them into the military, but they said, your talents are being wasted on 1911s. We'll get somebody else to make 1911s. We're going to use you to make airplane parts, parts for bomb sites, and technical equipment needed for the war effort. And so after the 500, they canceled the contract for any more. And instead, the Singer Sewing Machine Company was making technical parts for military weaponry. Then once the war started, so 1941, the end of 41, the war started. Singer's no longer making them. They need secondary sources, and that's when they went to Ithaca Gun Company. They were making shotguns and civilian weapons, so they were logical to make the 1911 A1. They made about 400,000. And by the way, that's about the same as Colt. Here's a Colt from World War II. This is actually about 1942. It has a Parkerized finish. They made a little over 400,000 of these. Just like, remember, World War I, Colt made about 500,000. World War II, they made a little less than that. Ithaca made about 400,000. And then Remington Rand made the most. They made about 900,000. So here's the Remington Rand versus the Remington UMC. That was a cartridge company. So the Remington, people think they're the same factory. They're not. Remington Rand was a different company than the Remington UMC from World War I. Notice the Parkerized finish. Very easy to distinguish between that and the finish on the Singer. This is a high polished blue. This is the Parkerized finish. Another maker would be Union Switch and Signal. This has a dew-light finish. It's sometimes hard to tell the dew-light from a Parkerized finish, but this is the Union Switch and Signal, and they actually made switches and signals for the railroad out in the Pittsburgh area. And so they made about 55,000. That makes these fairly rare and fairly desirable in terms of collectors are paying a premium. I saw a very nice one, which this is. Very nice one sold recently for $10,000 off of a website. Now, just to confuse things even a little bit more, there is one other licensed 1911, so in other words, Colt licensed Norway. Kongsberg factory in Norway was licensed by Colt to build the 1911 all the way back to the First World War. So as you know, in the Second World War, Norway was invaded and taken over by Germany. And when they did, then the Germans started making them in 1942. They started making 1911 Colts, except this is the Kongsberg Colt. There's the logo. It's like a crown with a K. The Kongsberg Colt, made in Norway under Nazi occupation. These are not specially marked in any way, but you can find the serial range, and the factory still had the records, so you can look up that when your gun was made. They're also dated right here. That makes it even easier. Only the ones from 1945 were Nazi-proofed. Now, the Nazis did make them under occupation and use them for their military. In fact, they were favorites among the SS troops and the Waffen troops, just because they're very well made, 45 caliber. They have the similar grip, usually a little more blondish. That's what I see. The magazine had the loop in it, all the way up to 1945. So they made thousands of them. These were made in Norway, but technically it's not a U.S. arm because it was made during German occupation. The rarest of these, I think only a little over 900. It has the Waffen stamp, dated 1945. So it went to the Nazi military, the German military, in 1945. But soon thereafter, the factory was taken over by the Allies, and they continued to make post-war Norwegian Colt 1911 licensed weapons like this. So that's a quick overview of the 1911 and the 1911 A1 from World War I to World War II, from the best to the worst, and a lot of little guys in between. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel, because you never know what's going to walk in the door at Legacy Collectibles.